Our exploration into the Great Depression begins amidst the Roaring Twenties, a time of post-World War I jubilation, unprecedented economic growth, and a full-scale cultural revival. The Roaring Twenties saw the nation pulsating with energy. It was the decade of skyscrapers, jazz music, and flappers who challenged societal norms by dancing. It worked. The rich were getting richer as always, and everyone else, although they were getting more financially stable, wanted more money. A newfound optimism gripped Wall Street, with the stock market experiencing dizzying highs as the average Joe put their hard-earned money into stocks they knew nothing about. And it also worked. Below the surface, economic inequalities started to grow. In rural America, farming communities were beginning to struggle as crop prices dropped, leaving the farmers struggling financially. But who cares? The stocks are up. While the rich enjoyed their steep increases in wealth, the average American started to face a slowing of wages, not enough to cause all-out mayhem, but enough to cause concern and bearishness in a normal decade. Except the stocks continued to rise. And when things are going good, we tend to ignore the problems that stare us right in the eye, so Americans began to take out loans so that they could invest in this booming stock market, also known as margin trading that is barely recommended amongst good investors, never mind clueless ones. But of course, the bank is happy to give these loans out because the economy is on the rise, and well, that's a lot of interest. As 1929 rolls around, the Dow Jones is up six-fold since the start of the decade. Awesome, right? Wrong. See, as the bank was loaning out so much money to wanting customers, they found themselves in a peculiar situation. The stocks were too high. They had to raise their interest rates. This left loans a lot harder to pay off, except the market was still booming, so much so that companies across all industries are mass-producing. However, people all across the country are starting to realize that something is up, and they become a little bit uncertain, to the point where they aren't buying the goods that companies have mass-produced. The company's response? Mass production gets replaced by mass layoffs, and people are not happy and frankly scared. It's time to get out of the stock market. Should be straightforward enough, right? The black days in the stock market. Uncertainty was high and people wanted to sell their stocks and ride off into the sunset with their stock market winnings, especially now that they lost their job and the problems that were knocking on the door and previously ignored are now well and truly smashing through the doors. This brings us to Black Thursday, also known as October 24th, 1929. As the opening bell rang on Black Thursday, frantic investors, both small and large, rushed to offload their stocks, triggering a frenzied sell-off. The outcome? The market falls 11%. Panic over, right? You've probably guessed by now, the answer is no, in fact, absolutely no. Come the following Tuesday, the market drops another 12%. The day cemented in history as Black Tuesday, or to give it its nickname, October 29th, 1929. The average Joe has lost all of his hard-earned money, and well, the margin traders are well and truly ruined. Not even the banks survived, with around 30% of institutions collapsing in the span of 4 years after 1929. It was so bad that even the people who saved their money through the 20s got destroyed, as the whole economy fell to pieces. The unemployment and human suffering. The years that followed were brutal, best described through the Dow Jones, which had the stocks down by 89% just 2.5 years after Black Monday. Yes, that's 89%. But the full impact of the stock market crash had spread far beyond Wall Street. The crash had casted a dark shadow over the whole nation. Following the crash, the fear of even more unemployment spread like wildfire. As industries closed their doors and business began to go under, people were left in occupational no man's land, and the statistics are frightening. Almost 25% of Americans were unemployed, the highest unemployment rate in American history. It's safe to say that the roaring soaring 20s were well and truly over. Sights throughout the country were those of helpless people lined up outside soup kitchens, waiting desperately for their next meal, which was never guaranteed. In cities across the nation, shantytowns began to spring up. They were mockingly named Hoovervilles, named after Herbert Hoover, the President of the United States at the time, who was widely blamed for the economic downfall. The shantytowns served as makeshift communities for people who just a few years prior were enjoying the seemingly unstoppable economic rise and had now lost everything. But it wasn't only jobs that were lost. Families were torn to shreds by the Depression. Men went in search of work, often moving from one place to another, while loved ones who were left behind had to face the pain of separation. Government response. With the 1932 election on the horizon, it looked like anyone could have won over Hoover, and it was Franklin D. Roosevelt who got the honors, winning the election by a landslide. In what was possibly the darkest days of the Depression, President Roosevelt set out on the mission of providing relief, recovery, and reformation to a nation on the verge of collapse. He done this through something called the New Deal. The New Deal served as an eventual answer to the crisis. It brought about a vast range of new programs, like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which offered jobs to young unemployed men. Another program was the Works Progress Administration, which helped fund countless public work projects. Despite Roosevelt coming to the country's aid like some sort of messiah, the country was still in complete turmoil, and while it was about to get even worse as a powerful force began to move in and strike its own blow against the country. The Dust Bowl. As the nation battled with the absolute battering of the Great Depression, it faced another relentless adversary. Mother Nature wanted her piece of the action and landed a blow on the country in the form of the Dust Bowl. This strangely named phenomenon was devastating, hitting the hardest in Texas and Oklahoma. It was the result of many different things, including drought. The region had experienced a long and severe drought which left the soil completely vulnerable to the elements. During this time of depression, farmers had plowed up much of the grassland in an attempt to plant crops. However, this just left the damaged soil even more exposed, and there were brutal consequences when the strong winds hit the region and easily picked up the soil to create massive dust storms that swept the region and became known as the Black Blizzards. The consequences of the Dust Bowl were severe all throughout the nation. Despite it only being in a specific region of the country, it led to crop failures, mass migrations of families from the region, and even more economic hardship in a time when it was least required. The global ripple effect. The Great Depression, which originated in America, was extending far beyond the United States border. The economic collapse had a worldwide impact. The previously thriving exchange of goods and commerce was grinding to a halt. Countries, now faced with a decline in exports and a reduced amount of foreign investments, began to take actions that would shield their own industries. In ironic fashion, these measures actually worsened the crisis. Many nations across multiple continents were now becoming a part of America's struggle. Europe, who were still healing from the damage inflicted during World War I, ended up within the Great Depression's grip. Unemployment began to spread across the continent and many others. Asia was hit hard also, and one country above all was hit horrendously: Canada. The Great Depression's impact extended far beyond just economics. It sparked a lot of political anger and uproar, and one man in particular was leading the charge in one of Europe's biggest powers. Can you guess who it was? What about now? The rise of Hitler and his fascist ideologies was gaining a lot of traction in what was slowly becoming a Nazi Germany, and the tragedy that was about to come was actually the thing that pulled economies out of turmoil. America's unexpected savior. With the rise of the Third Reich under the Nazi ruling, global tensions began to heighten. With the Third Reich's declaration of war in September 1939, the global factions began to rearm and prepare for the all-but-guaranteed war. The new coming tragedy set the stage for a revitalization for economies worldwide. Factories that remained dormant for years were all of a sudden sprung back to life all across the world, which allowed for millions of people to find new employment within the war industries. As World War II neared its end with Nazi Germany falling to the Allies, the world had been through some immense changes. The wounds from the Great Depression were now accompanied by those of a worldwide conflict, and although the economic scars were still healing, the end of the war felt like a new page had been turned and a chance to rebuild after a conflict that had changed the world indefinitely. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Great Depression. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this in the future, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also comment down below to let us know you subscribed, and we'll respond to you as soon as possible. We'll see you next time.